Like and subscribe right now, or you're gonna have terrible luck for the next week. For centuries, tales of seafaring phantom ships have been passed around from sailor to sailor, and even today, our fascination with ghost ships is a known tradition. From mysterious ships discovered floating silently in the high seas with no crew aboard, to ships appearing mysteriously and suddenly vanishing into thin air shortly after, these thrillingly spooky tales are as fun to narrate as they are to hear. Hello and welcome to another episode of 100M, where we'll look at 10 real ghost ships that are sure to leave you feeling eerily chilly. Number 10. Jian Seng. When you board a ship spotted drifting through uncharted waters, but find no evidence of recent human activities whatsoever, suspicions arise. And there's nothing that spells ghost ship louder than an anonymous, unmanned vessel floating about the sea to no purpose or direction. The Jian Seng was such a mysterious ghost ship. In fact, it was so mysterious that it barely even had a backstory to it, other than the fact that it was found drifting into Australian waters in 2006. The Australian Coast Watch officers who made contact with it didn't find any soul aboard, nor were there any belongings or cargo in her hold. To add to that mix-up, investigators couldn't find any identifying documentation, nor records of a distress signal on her logs, or any reports of a missing ship. It was like the ship didn't exist at all, and since nobody could find out where it had come from and who it belonged to, it had to be intentionally sunken. Number 9. SS Urang Madan. There has never been a ghost ship story that instills a sense of terror the way the eerie tale of the SS Urang Madan does. The ship was reportedly chartered to sail from a small port in China to Costa Rica, but apparently a mysterious tragedy betided her before she arrived at her destination. The story goes that a horrifying distress call was received from the ship, with the caller claiming to be the sole survivor on board after the captain, all officers, and the crew members died mysteriously. The caller's frail voice weirdly ended with the words, "I die." The rescuers found the ship with bodies lying all over the chart room and the bridge. Their lifeless faces stared into space in the most terrifying expressions, but there was no evidence as to what had caused their demise. Before any investigations could be done, the ship caught fire, exploded, and sank shortly after it had been discovered. Number 8. Carol A. Deering. On her return run after delivering a cargo of coal at Rio de Janeiro, the main schooner Carol A. Deering ran aground and was found abandoned at the treacherous rocks of Diamond Shoals. All sails were set and the ship was sufficiently seaworthy, but the lifeboats, the captain's logbook, and most importantly, the crewmen were missing. With her absent crew nowhere to be found and the circumstances of her stranding being traced back to a supposed mutiny orchestrated by the first mate, speculations ran wild. Conspiracy theorists were convinced that the mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle had something to do with it, while others believed that aliens or some supernatural powers were at play. To date, it's still unclear as to whether it was foul play by mutineers, anarchic rum runners, anti-American communist pirates, or some inexplicable supernatural encounter at sea that left the Carol A. Deering in disarray and robbed the ship of her crew. Number 7. Lady Lovabond. Nautical legends will have you know that it's bad luck bringing a woman on board, even if the ship be named Lady Lovabond. Legend has it that on his wedding night, the ship's captain took no heed to the age-old belief and decided to take his newlywed bride on a cruise to celebrate their union. Unbeknownst to the captain, the first mate was secretly in love with his wife and was furiously envious of their union. So when the ship set sail along River Thames, charted for Porto in Portugal, the first mate intentionally steered the ship straight into the notorious Goodwin Sands, an area infamous for being the graveyard of many fine ships and seamen. It's believed that the Lady Lovabond was ripped open when it hit the perilous shoals that day, killing everyone aboard. It came as a surprise, therefore, when the captain of the ship Edinburgh recorded almost colliding into a 3-masted schooner that looked exactly like the Lady Lovabond, 50 years after it had been wrecked and sank. Number 6. Seabird. Like with most ghost ship stories, the 18th century vessel found close to Newport Harbor in Rhode Island, sailing without a soul on board will leave you wondering as to what horror must have befallen the crew. The first people to board this silent ship were amazed that the cargo hold was full and the crew's personal effects were left intact. What made this tale even more macabre is that by many accounts, witnesses thought that they had spotted the ship's captain, who was later missing when the ship was boarded. The kettle was boiling on the stove, and some will swear that they caught a waft of tobacco still lingering in the air. Naturally, as with all good ghost ship stories, people often added some details to the retellings in an attempt to spice up the ghostly woes told in the narrative. After all, the spookiness is in the details. Number 5. The Octavius. Here's a ghost ship story to send shudders down your spine. The mystery of the Octavius revolves around the eerie discovery of the ship's captain's body found frozen at his desk, pen in hand, and the ship's logbook opened before him. The story began in 1761 at the port of London, where the Octavius was loading cargo destined for China. On their return trip from China, the captain decided to take an unusual route, the Northwest Passage, a challenging voyage that had never been accomplished at the time. That was the last anyone heard of the Octavius, and it was declared lost at sea. The ship was later discovered in 1775 off the frigid waters of Greenland, and when the boarding party finally managed to break open the hatch, they were met by the most terrifying sight: the bodies of the entire 28-man crew laying lifeless in their quarters, frozen to death. Number 4. Jenny. When you're narrating the discovery of the ill-fated British schooner Jenny, terms like petrifying and disturbing simply don't cut it. According to legend, the English schooner had been lost at sea for 17 years since leaving the port of the Isle of Wight in 1823. It was presumed to have sunk in the Antarctic, when in fact it was only frozen in an ice barrier at the Drake Passage, a treacherous and unforgiving body of water between Cape Horn and the South Shetland Islands of Antarctica. On the frozen schooner, bodies of the crewmen lay lifeless, preserved by the cold climate of the Antarctic. In the cabin, the captain's body was still sitting in a chair with a pen in the hand. The message in his logbook read, May 4th, 1823. No food for 71 days. I am the only one left alive. Number 3. Mary Celeste. Santa Maria Island in the Azores was the last entry on SV Mary Celeste's log slate. After passing the island on November 25, 1872, the brigantine merchant ship was abandoned in unknown circumstances and remained stranded in the Atlantic, completely unoccupied. She was found on December 4, 1872, with minimal damage but largely in good shape and under sail. The ship was still seaworthy, but devoid of the captain and his crew. Since the lifeboats were missing, the assumption was that the crew must have abandoned the ship and sailed to shore in the lifeboats. But what's puzzling and unsettling about the Mary Celeste story is that the ship's cargo and valuables were completely untouched when it was found weeks later. There was, in fact, plenty of provisions in her hold to have lasted the crew 6 months at sea. Dozens of theories abound, all trying to unravel the mystery surrounding the Mary Celeste's unusual voyage. With the crew's whereabouts remaining unknown to date, however, the world may never know for sure.
Now it's time for today's best pick.
And in today's best pick, perhaps the most famous ghost ship in both European and American maritime folklore. Number 2. The Flying Dutchman. There isn't a phantom ship in maritime folklore that has inspired painters, writers, and film producers as much as the Flying Dutchman. You might remember this legendary ghost ship from the Disney swashbuckling fantasy film Pirates of the Caribbean. But it is in fact an old player in the eerie world of real phantom ship stories. While it's hard to put a definitive date on the legend, the real-life Flying Dutchman is said to have been a 17th century Dutch merchant ship. The merchantman was captained by the skilled but unscrupulous Captain Hendrik Vanderdecken. Legend has it that once, during a ferocious storm, Captain Vanderdecken found himself struggling to steer the Flying Dutchman through the Cape of Good Hope, but failed miserably due to the adverse weather conditions. On his final attempt, being determined more than ever before, the captain made a vow that there was nothing he wouldn't do to get the ship around, even if it meant drifting until doomsday. Since then, the ship was said to have been cursed, never to make port, doomed to sail the oceans for eternity.
Before we move on, I've got a little challenge for you that'll take 5 seconds to complete. So here's the deal. You just leave a like on this video, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell, and you will get 25 years of amazing luck. Try it, it really works.
Number 1. The Kalush. The Kalush is said to be a mythical ghost ship crewed by drowned sailors who mysteriously come to life when brought aboard the ship. Legend has it that the ghost ship comes to existence every night and can be seen roaming about the ominous and isolated stretch of water surrounding the Chiloe, an island off the southwest coast of Chile. It is said that from land, the Kalush is seen as a strikingly beautiful, bright, and bustling ship. It doesn't, however, linger on the surface for too long, so you might miss it when it submerges itself underwater, where it will stay for much of its time. It is a phantom ship after all. Keep it 100.